I could feel the cold seeping through the thin walls of my tent, creeping into my sleeping bag. The forest around me was eerily silent, not a single rustle or chirp breaking from the stillness of the cold night. It was the kind of silence that made my skin crawl, a silence that whispered of unforeseen dangers lurking just beyond. I had always loved the solitude of camping alone, the feeling of being one with nature, but tonight, that solitude felt suffocating. I tossed and turned, trying to shake off the sense of unease that had settled over me like a heavy blanket. Just as I was about to drift off into an uneasy sleep, I heard it. At first, it was just a faint rustling, barely audible over the pounding of my heart in my ears. I froze, straining my ears to catch any hint of sound. There it was again, a soft shuffle followed by a low, guttural growl. I fumbled for my flashlight and opened my tent flap, my hands shaking. The beam of light pierced the darkness, illuminating the thick wall of trees all around me. For a moment, all I could see was the swaying shadows cast by the trees. Then, movement caught my eye. It was just a flicker at the edge of my vision, too quick to be anything but my imagination. But then, it happened again. A dark shape darting between the trees with unnatural speed. Panic clawed at my chest as I realized there was something out there. I wanted to scream, to run as far away from this place as possible, but fear held me rooted to my spot. I listened intently, straining my ears to hear any clue as to what was lurking just beyond my tent. The minutes stretched, each second feeling like an eternity as I waited for something, anything, to happen. And then it did. The growling grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was right outside my tent. My mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare, but every escape route was blocked by the unknown. I huddled in the darkness, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I waited for the inevitable. But just as suddenly as it had begun, the noise stopped. The forest was silent once more, as if whatever had been stalking me had simply vanished into thin air. I lay there for what felt like hours, too terrified to move, too terrified to even breathe. But eventually, exhaustion won out over fear, and I drifted into a fitful sleep. When I awoke the next morning, the sun was shining brightly through the trees, casting long shadows on the forest floor. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe that it had all just been a nightmare, that the creature lurking in the darkness had been nothing more than a figment of my imagination. But then I saw the tracks. They were large, too large to belong to any animal I knew of, and they led straight to the edge of my tent before disappearing into the underbrush. Panic surged through me once more as I realized that whatever had been out there last night was real, all too real. I wasted no time in packing up my camp, my hands shaking as I hurriedly stuffed my belongings into my backpack. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a shiver down my spine, convinced that at any moment the creature would return to finish what it had started. But miraculously, I made it out of the woods unscathed. But the memory of that night will forever be burned into my mind. And as I sit here now, safe and sound in the comfort of my own home, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I had not been so lucky. What horrors lurk in the darkness of the forest waiting for their next unsuspecting victim? So, if you ever find yourself alone in the woods at night, remember my story and pray that you are not the next one to encounter the creature from the darkness. As I ventured deeper into the dense woods, the sun's warm rays struggled to penetrate the thick canopy above, casting eerie shadows that danced around me. It was late afternoon, and the forest was cloaked in a tranquil silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of a bird. Setting up camp had become second nature to me over the years, and I moved with practiced efficiency as I pitched my tent in a small clearing near a babbling brook. The sound of rushing water was soothing, and I welcomed its gentle melody as I worked. But as I straightened up and surveyed my surroundings more closely, a chill ran down my spine. There, just beyond the edge of the clearing, stood a massive bear. My heart pounded in my chest as I froze, my mind racing with fear. The bear seemed to sense my presence and turned its head, fixing me with a dark, piercing gaze. Its fur bristled, and a low growl rumbled from deep within its throat. I knew I was in grave danger. Every instinct within me screamed at me to flee, but I dared not move a muscle. One wrong move, and the bear would surely attack. Time seemed to stand still as we stared each other down, locked in a deadly standoff. My mind raced, searching desperately for a way to escape this nightmare. Suddenly, the bear let out a deafening roar, its massive frame lunging forward as it charged straight for me. Adrenaline surged through my veins, and with a primal scream, I turned and bolted into the forest. Branches whipped at my face, and my lungs burned as I sprinted blindly through the undergrowth. Behind me, I could hear the thunderous footfalls of the bear, closing in with terrifying speed. I pushed myself harder, driven by pure instinct and the primal urge to survive. Every muscle in my body screamed in protest, but I refused to give in to exhaustion. I had to keep running, keep fighting, or else I would surely meet my end in the jaws of that monstrous beast. At last, after what felt like an eternity of frantic flight, I burst into a small clearing and skidded to a halt, gasping for breath. The bear was nowhere to be seen, and for a moment I allowed myself to hope that I had managed to outrun it. But then, from the shadows at the edge of the clearing, the bear emerged once again, its massive form silhouetted against the fading light of the setting sun. I was trapped, with nowhere left to run. Summoning every ounce of courage I had left, I faced the bear head-on, bracing myself for the worst. But to my astonishment, the bear stopped in its tracks, its fierce gaze softening as it regarded me with something akin to curiosity. For a moment, we stood there, two creatures bound by fear and uncertainty, suspended in a fragile truce. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the bear turned and lumbered back into the depths of the forest, leaving me alone in the gathering darkness. I dropped to my knees, trembling with relief and disbelief. I had survived against all odds, but the memory of that terrifying encounter will haunt me for the rest of my days. And now, as I sit here, penning these words by the dying light of my campfire, I can't help but wonder what other dangers lurk in the shadows of these ancient woods, waiting to claim their next victim. But one thing is certain. I will never forget the day I came face to face with the ultimate predator and lived to tell the tale. As an avid hiker and camper, I often find myself venturing into the depths of nature, seeking solitude and tranquility. It was on one such excursion that I stumbled upon something that forever shattered my innocence and left me shaken to my very core. The forest I decided to explore that day was dense, with towering trees blocking out most of the sunlight. The air was thick with the earthy scent of damp soil and decaying leaves. I had been walking for hours, following a narrow trail that seemed to wind endlessly through the wilderness. As I rounded a bend in the path, my eyes fell upon a chilling sight. Across the forest floor were countless animal skeletons, arranged in a macabre display that made my skin crawl. The bones were bleached white from exposure to the elements, and there was dried blood splattered all around the area, staining the ground a dark, ominous shade of crimson. My curiosity piqued. I hesitated for a moment before deciding to investigate further. Perhaps it was foolishness that drove me forward, or perhaps it was simply morbid fascination. But I couldn't resist the urge to uncover the mystery behind this gruesome scene. As I pressed on, the dense foliage seemed to close in all around me, casting eerie shadows that danced in the flickering light filtering through the canopy above. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end, as a sense of evil washed over me. It wasn't long before I began to hear it. Faint whispers carried on the wind, like the distant murmurings of unseen specters. My heart began to race as I followed the sound, my senses heightened to the slightest rustle or movement in the underbrush. Then, as if materializing from the very depths of my darkest nightmares, I saw them. A group of figures cloaked in bright red robes, their faces obscured by shadow as they stood in a circle around a roaring fire. The air was thick with the scent of burning flesh, and the rhythmic chanting of the cultists made my heart stop. I froze in terror, my mind struggling to comprehend the scene unfolding before my eyes. Who were these people? And what dark purpose drove them to gather in this desolate corner of the forest? Fear threatened to overwhelm me as I realized that I was intruding upon something sinister, something I should not be witnessing. Slowly, I started backing up, trying my hardest not to make a sound. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As I walked backwards the way I had come, my foot came down hard on a dry twig, snapping it with a deafening crack that reverberated through the stillness like a gunshot. The chanting ceased abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence that made my skin crawl. I dared not look back as I full sprinted back through the forest, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum as adrenaline surged through my veins. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I burst into the clearing where I had parked my car, gasping for air and drenched in sweat. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I struggled to unlock the door and clamber inside. As I peeled away from that cursed place, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something ancient and forbidden, something that should never have been disturbed. So, hear my warning, dear reader, and tread carefully when venturing into the unknown. For there is evil within this world, and to encounter it is to invite madness and despair into your very soul.